Where do we start? How do we even talk about this movie? Eric, do you have an idea on how to start, or do you want me to hand off the baton to me? Yeah, you wanna see?
I would tread very carefully because in the chat, Bruce mentioned like and it goes with this and God's Country of a boiling a frog type movie. So we shouldn't get to the part where the frog's like, I think I might be in trouble. But like everything before that should probably be fair game, I think.
Bruce, we're going to tread lightly on God's Country. So what can we say about this? Well, Thandie Newton, plays a woman named Sandra. She's a humanities professor in a rural college town. The movie is based on a short story from acclaimed author James Lee Burke. But anyway, Sandra, I don't know how much we want to really spoil. The movie starts off with her at a crematorium. Her mother's ashes. They're going to put her mother's coffin and they're going to put her in fire. And actually, you witness the crematorium. And she's obviously in mourning. They live out in, where is this? Is this somewhere in a rural area in, I believe, Montana, And she lives out in the forest, but there's actually some wide open spaces. The problem with Sandra is she's been a professor quite a while, and maybe we might reveal a couple things. I think we're just going to wing it right here. But in mourning regarding her mother's passing, she's actually passed the buck maybe for several years during her years as a professor. Just we're assuming it's inferred that she's collecting a paycheck. She loves being a teacher, but maybe there are things that she lets slip by like everyone else does because that's, you got to earn a paycheck. With the death of her mother, there are things that she just really will not stand for. One of them is two brother hunters. They're brothers. They park their red pickup truck near her actually on her property, and she kindly asks them, please, she writes a note, please do not park on my property. Initially, it's them asking her if she could, and if they could, and she says no, and there's some little bit of an aggression regarding this. This conflict, this little bit minor disagreement leads to dire situations regarding God's Country. And it also there's a domino effect. Her frustrations with these hunters and their frustration with her leads her to trying to get some help from the acting sheriff of the small town as well, and it spills over to her daily work life as well. That is God's Country, again directed and co-written by Julian Higgins. Eric Holmes, let us start with you. How did this movie strike you? It runs at 102 minutes. Did it have you enthralled all throughout the way?
No, not all throughout. Early on, it just seemed like indie porn to me. And I was like, oh, this is gonna be a rough sit. But like I mentioned, Bruce said it was like the boiling the frog. Like it slowly started creeping up on me. And then until it gets to the finale, and I was like, oh wow, this is really good. And then I actually went back and watched it again.
Wow.
And if you remember when we talked about Petite Maman, that had that same kind of effect on me. Watching Petite Maman, I'm like, this is fucking boring. I hate this movie. And then I'm watching the movie and I'm getting into it. I'm like, this movie's awesome. And then I go back and watch it. And all those parts I saw that were boring before were like, okay, this is all starting to make sense right now. So this is definitely a movie that'll work great on a rewatch. And it feels like a Taylor Sheridan movie. It's got that kind of Wind River. What was the one he did with Chris Pine and Ben Foster?
Hell or High Water.
Oh, yes, right. That's right.
I couldn't think of his most famous one. Actually, his most famous one's probably Sicario, but yeah, this one's really good. It got kind of messy in the middle because they were doing things of Thandie Newton. Her character was like, it kind of turned into like idiots would call it woke, but there was some like social issues that she had to deal with.
Right. She's pulling for diversity it's not too much of a spoiler. She's pushing for diversity in her college as opposed to passing the buck like we're assuming she's done before.
But yeah, all that stuff, like as I'm watching, I'm like, where'd this come from? This is not the movie I've been watching up to this point. It doesn't make sense. And then you get, then the rest of the movie goes on. And then I'm watching it again. I'm like, oh, okay. This is all starting to weave together. But yeah, the first watch, this was tough to get to the end. But once I did, and then I went back and watched it again, it got much better the second time. I mean, that's Marshall, a good movie, right?
I think. You saw it freaking twice, and
well, because when I got to the end, I'm like, God, I feel like I missed a lot. Because like as everything's starting to fall into place, I'm like, okay. I think, wait, what was that part at the beginning? So I had to. And I had to go back and do it again just to be like, oh, okay, that pays off there. Now I see where we're going.
Does the third act, maybe the last 15 minutes, hit you harder upon the second watch when you see all the visual cues, all of those puzzle pieces come together? Did you have a bigger impact regarding?
Not so much. It's more that once I knew, and this is kind of why you don't like to spoil movies, and I'm not going to spoil this. I think this would be a movie that would probably benefit from spoilers, because there's certain movies that, like, once you know what's going on, that's why you go back and watch it again. It's like, okay, now I know what time it is. Now I can kind of fully appreciate what's coming before. Petite Maman's perfect example. Like, if you know what that is going in, the air quote boring parts at the beginning will probably resonate more. I think the first half resonated more with me on the second watch, now that I knew kind of what was coming.
That is a fully fleshed review from Eric Holmes regarding God's Country. He's seen it twice, and I don't blame him, because, Bruce, do you agree that there's a lot of puzzle pieces that maybe upon first blush you might gloss over because this is such a slow burn thriller? Is it that maybe warrants a second watch? Was this movie powerful for you?
I think it was pretty powerful to me. It was pretty good. I was a little more on board all the way through, and I guess for whatever reason, I kind of trusted this movie to answer some of the questions I had. And there were definitely some questions, and I think what he's alluding to are some of those things in the first part of it. You're kind of like, okay, well, why are we doing this? There's some kind of loose, it feels like a lot of loose ends or things that aren't quite making sense, but those do all get threaded together, as he kind of indicates as well. One of the things that kind of struck me right out of the gate on this one is this is a movie where you have this character, it's not quite following the rules, just people do the right thing to each other, like that for each other. That's kind of the nature of her main conflict. And kind of similar to, so he talked about Emily the Criminal, how when she's faced with a conflict, surprisingly, she walks into it and kind of kicks ass. This isn't that exactly. What she does in this movie is she also doesn't walk away from conflict. She kind of comes from the point of view of like, hey, the right thing to do is this. I am requesting you to do the right thing in a very civil way, like another human being should, and you're failing to do it. And everyone else around me thinks that I'm the bad person for saying something. Like they just want her to kind of just settle down. It's okay. Don't worry about it. These guys are just using your property, whatever. This is also a movie of escalations. Like you hear the term, what do you call them? Microaggressions. Yes. This is a movie that starts with lots of microaggressions and eventually, like we said, cooks the frog and escalates into macroaggressions, if that's a term. I think that the tone of this is really consistent. It's kind of cold and bleak, but it kind of needs to be that. And there is an emotional core with her character that's kind of good, I think, as it goes along. And there's actually some pretty heartbreakingly beautiful moments towards the end of this movie as well. I really like her character a lot. And I like the fact that there are certain things about her character. At one point, she gets a gun out of a box. That's not, okay, people have guns in their houses, whatever. But there's a lot more behind that. And when you find out a lot more behind that, it fleshes out a whole bunch of stuff that you saw earlier now is recontextualized. And now you're like, okay, a lot of this makes a lot more sense now. I think it's a pretty fine movie, and I think people who like you said, like slow burn dramas with thriller elements, not super uplifting, but very well acted and very well shot and very well just produced. I think this is going to be a satisfying watch for those people that like that kind of thing.
I love this movie. This movie is one of these things, Eric, you were alluding to, the slow burn nature of God's Country. And I'm watching this and I'm thinking, okay, so this is going really slow. God's Country, I feel like I'm watching every single leaf getting turned. When will this end? But when you start getting into the rhythms of this movie, it hooks you. There are moments in this movie regarding the microaggressions and the conflicts that are absolutely nerve-wracking. Yeah, I was nervous through a lot of this movie. One of the advantages regarding our podcast, doing podcast reviews, is I've actually read a bunch of these reviews for God's Country, and they mention a very big pivotal plot point, and we just haven't mentioned it. I mean, we can literally, I was thinking of mentioning it because every single review I've seen online mentions this situation, but Bruce and Eric said, no, let's not mention it. And what's great about that is the omission of this extra information regarding Thandie Newton's character. If you're surprised, it actually upscales your viewing experience for God's Country. If you don't know her backstory fully, all you need to know is her mother passed away at the beginning of the movie and she's living out there in the country. Once it starts fleshing out her character, what I'm saying is don't read all those online reviews regarding God's Country. It'll lay out the map for you. You'll still enjoy it, but there's a little bit of a surprise that Eric and Bruce have left out regarding God's Country, which I was going to spill, but I'm going to just be quiet about it and just say this is, in my opinion, like Bruce was saying, saying slow burn thrillers, highly recommended. I have to admit, I have not rewatched the movie like Eric Holmes, but I have seen the end of God's Country about 15 times. I've seen the end. I just we can't really say anything about it. Let's just say the ending is something you're going to remember. It's one of the most memorable endings of this year or any other year. But running at 102 minutes, it hits theaters, only in theaters September 16th. I believe this is worth a watch in your theater, especially if you want some visceral, intellectual, insightful, and slow burn cinema. So for me, my rating for God's Country, I think I gave it 4 stars, but as the days progress, I'm loving it even more. I'm giving God's Country 4.5 stars. Eric Holmes, 2-time watcher of God's Country, what is your rating?
Yeah, I'm probably 4.5 too. What you said about going to the theater, this would actually be a really good one to see in the theater if it's available. Because you think a theater going experience like Flash Boom Bang, this doesn't have that. Well, I guess it kind of does towards the end, but it doesn't really have that. But movies like this and movies like A Ghost Story, like really slow burn movies like this, I think work better in theaters. Just because for some reason when you're sitting in a theater, it's easier to be more focused.
It kind of locks you in and immerses you in the world, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And also, we didn't mention this has a lot of similar DNA to Killing of Two Lovers. Like,
yes.
If you like Killing of Two Lovers, definitely check this out. If you check this out and you like it and you haven't seen Killing of Two Lovers, watch Killing of Two Lovers. I think I like Killing of Two Lovers a little better, but this one's still really good. And I'm probably with you, Greg.
Yeah.
4.5.
4.5. Yeah, I like The Killing of Two Lovers just a little bit more, but that does not make God's Country a lesser film. I mean, it's still worth watching.
That's like holding platinum and go, gold? Are you kidding me?
Exactly. 4.5 for Eric Holmes, 4.5 for me. Bruce Purkey, your rating on God's Country?
4.5. I'm right with you guys.
Wow, 4.5. Yeah, I was surprised at how much. And Thandie Newton, my goodness, she's fantastic.
Excellent. She's been great for years, but she holds this one down.
Right. Oh, also, you guys don't remember this. We all reviewed that movie, Murder at Yellowstone City. I don't know if you guys remember that Western. I think who reviewed? Did all 3 of us review it?
I didn't get it because the link or something went weird. But
Okay, right. Eric Holmes, the Tanya Beatty or something, the Indian girl, she was in Murder at Yellowstone City. She was one of the main characters. She was the one with the horses and whatnot at Murder at Yellowstone City. Just FYI. She's very good.
I don't think this is a spoiler because it happens at the beginning. But when I watched it the second time, that opening scene with her talking to her students, I felt like that would have been better at the end than the beginning.
Okay, what you're talking about just making the way through life.
Because when I'm watching, and I'm not going to say what happens at the end, but like when I'm watching that scene, that was one of the things going back and watching it just kind of drilled in my head. I'm watching that scene, I'm going, dude, this scene, because the first time I saw that scene, I'm like, let's get on to the fucking movie, Jesus Christ, move. And then the movie gets over and I go back and I watch that scene, and now I'm watching that exact same scene that I just couldn't wait for it to be over. I'm like, oh wow, this is fantastic. This should have been the end of the movie.
Yeah, that isn't. Yeah, I can't wait to actually watch this again. So that is God's Country.